I'm sure you have been in rooms where people are talking, people are making noise, and nobody's actually making sense. I've been in those rooms. I've seen brilliant people, I've seen smart people, I've seen people who have higher capacity, I've seen people who are making the loudest noise. But the real ones are the ones who speak the language of value. Think about that for a second. The language of value. Now, when you speak the language of value, people listen to you differently. They don't just listen to hear your words, but they feel your words. They remember every single thing that you said. When you speak the language of value, you realize that the room goes down, the room, everyone is quiet, everyone is focused. So in today's video, I want to talk about something that people will really talk about. That is the language of value. When you speak the language of value, you influence people in a different manner. You make an impact in a different direction. So what matters is your voice. The way you use your voice makes the difference. It's not about your title, it is not about what you own, it's not about your experience, it's your voice. How you use your voice changes everything. So in today's video, we're going to dive into the language of value. Let's get into it. Let me share with you something that I learned early on in my career. When I began as a project manager, I learned something that has changed me in so many ways, in a profound way that I really do appreciate going through that experience. When I started as a project manager, I thought that communication meant talking. So what I do is I convince people, I communicate, I explain over and over again, thinking that that is the right way for me to give out value to people. But after one meeting that I had with my team member, a team member walked up to me and said, "Mr. Valeri, you said quite a lot, but I don't really understand what you want us to do." That hit me so hard because communication doesn't mean that you over make a noise or you speak so loud. You have to give the value. They didn't really get what I wanted them to do. People didn't really understand. That just told me there that noise doesn't really have to be loud, right? You can still be making noise while being in silence, trying to just communicate at your pace, thinking that you are doing the right thing. That there taught me a lot of lesson. Why? Because when you speak the language of value, people are going to trust you. When you speak the language of value, they understand your ideas and it stick. When you speak the language of value, you influence people. You make them want to stay around, not because you want them to stay, but because they really understand the value that you're bringing to the table. Now, think about this for a second. When you look at the greatest leaders, the ones who are really creating the impact, the ones who have influenced others to do things beyond their imagination or beyond their capacity, you realize that they don't really speak high level languages, they don't speak all the grammar that people claim to understand. They just make sure that everything is simple, clarity, everything is clear. They speak a plain language to make sure that the language or the value cuts across every corner. Everyone in that space, everyone in that auditorium understands what you're saying. Clarity doesn't have to be loud. Noise doesn't mean that you are screaming. You could still be communicating at a very low tone, but you're making noise. The moment people don't understand what you are trying to pass, they'll be lost and there'll be no value in that space. So, this is one thing I want you to understand. Communication has to be simplified as possible. You need to make your communication channel very simple. Your language has to be simple. Simplicity is the best way for you to communicate with people. You have to practice that. Now let's get into this very practical. What you have to understand when we talk about speaking the language of value. Now you might be asking yourself, how do I really speak the language of value? Now I have three pillars that I use daily to make sure that I communicate across a room, across a site, whatever I'm communicating, I just need to make sure that I use these three pillars. The first one you have to use is this: bring clarity, not confusion. You need to ask yourself, what am I trying to make these people understand? What do I want them to do? If you are not able to answer this question, you're not ready to communicate. Clarity is your responsibility. It is not that of the audience. So you need to be clear about this. In project management, what does this mean? This means that you have to take a 5-page information and turn it into a one sentence. Make sure that you just send it across. Simplicity is the key to communication. Clarity matters a lot. If you cannot take that page and turn it into a sentence as a project manager, you are not ready to communicate with people. You have to make sure that you bring it down as simple as possible. You are not speaking to impress people. You are speaking to create an impact. The moment you start bringing grammar inside, knowing your audience, knowing the people that you are speaking to, you have destroyed communication at that point. You are trying to impress people. At that moment, you have not really tailored it to match the people who are sitting there, to match your audience, the people who have come to grab the audience. Yes, you are high there in terms of grammar, in terms of education. But what about the people that you are communicating with? You have to make sure that they speak the same language like you. Simplicity is your responsibility. It's not that of the audience. So the first thing that you need to do is clarity, not confusion. The second thing you have to understand is offer solutions and not stories. Everyone has a story to tell. If we start talking about each other, we might stay the whole day. If you bring an emotional debate on the table, trust me, people are going to enjoy it, people are going to talk about it, but the next day, nobody is going to think about what we are supposed to do about the project. So the next time you are in a meeting, you are in an environment where you want to pass a message across, the first thing you need to do is bring that message or the solution that we are trying to come up with in one sentence. When you come up with it in one sentence, the next thing you have to do is come up with an actionable step that we have to take. What are we doing? What is the action that we're taking? That is what you have to do. And the third thing that you have to do is open the room for questioning, right? That invites ownership. Who is doing this? Who is taking responsibility for this? Who is in charge of this? Don't bring stories to the table when you're trying to communicate, when you're trying to offer solutions. No, you have to open that space, right? Where you summarize everything, bring actionable steps, and then you create ownership. That's the second thing you have to do. And the last pillar is communicate direction, not confusion. That is the third pillar that I use. I need to make sure that each time I open my mouth to speak to people, I bring clarity, not confusion, right? Because leadership is not about saying more. It's more about amplifying based on what you already said, making sure that you simplify what you already said in some secondary way that people can better understand. So it's not about saying more, it's more about explaining what you already said. Now you need to understand that offering value is not about quality, it's about the precision of value that you give to people. That is it. Speaking the language of value is all about precision. So make sure that you understand this third pillar of communicating, speaking the language of value to people. Communicate direction, not confusion. So you see, the language of value is not just a communication skill, it's an identity shift. Because when you start speaking the language of value, you start thinking value. You start thinking of your time, your words. You start prioritizing every sentence that you make before you voice it out there. You are not just speaking to be to sound smart, but you want to make people feel smart. It is not about you, it is more about your audience. It is more about the people. That is how the language of value works. It's more about making sure that people understand what you're trying to say. In that scenario, your influence doesn't just move, right? It moves without you even necessarily making any adjustment. So you understand now that the value of language is a top level priority that you need to start shifting your mindset from speaking just to impress people, from speaking just to sound smart, but speaking to communicate to your audience and make sure that they feel the same way you feel and they understand what you're trying to pass across. That is how the language of value works. I want to leave you with this thought. In life, in leadership, there will always be noise, updates, information. People will always make noise. But in the middle of that, you can be that person that brings value. You can be the one who speaks when it's necessary and stays silent when it is not necessary. You can be the person who brings value. You can be the ones who slow things down. You can be the one who brings clarity. Because here is the truth. People will always forget how loud you were. People will always forget what you said. But this is what they are never going to forget. How you brought clarity in your words. How your word made them feel in that space where they were walking. That is one thing that people are never going to forget, and that is how leadership is. So the next time you are walking into a conversation, a meeting, ask yourself this: am I going to speak the language of value, or am I going to make noise? Don't just speak. Speak the language of value. Speak leadership. Speak progress. Speak clarity. That is what makes the difference. And that was Figure Out PM, where we don't just speak the language of project management, but we also speak transformation. So if you have watched up to this moment, please, I want you to do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. My promise to you, alongside with my team, is very simple: to consistently bring you real, honest, and valuable content that helps you figure out project management one conversation at a time. Thank you for being here.